Welcome to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. I'm Alice. I'm back in the driver's seat again. I hope you don't mind my driving. This week's episode is a conversation with Jeopardy alumni Elijah Blumov. I've done something inadvisable on this episode, which is try to recreate a phone conversation that Elijah and I had. I was chatting to him and we were talking about things like success and ambition. We got into things like legacy and being remembered, and also just the ins and outs of like how you get ahead in this crazy world of poetry. And I thought, you know, this might not be a bad episode. Maybe we could like make an episode out of this phone conversation, which is the kind of thing that a podcaster will do to you. We're way worse than poets. Poets will steal your experience and put it into a poem. I'll steal your entire phone conversation. Yeah, so I got him on the line, and that's the kind of conversation that we had. We talked about how to last as a poet. How are you going to be remembered? Are you going to be remembered? Big, scary questions that I don't spend any time thinking about if I can help it. But I think Elijah does think about these things because he's less terrified in general than I am. Elijah is headed to ALSCW with Matthew and I think Zena and Ethan and a bunch of other people, and I really wish I was going. But that's part of the reason why we thought we would do this week, just to give Matthew a tiny bit of breathing room. Speaking of Matthew, before we get into the conversation itself, I wanted to let you know about a poem of his that has just been republished on a Substack journal called The New Stylus. The New Stylus is edited by Shannon Weinstone, and the poem, one of the poems that they took of Matthew's, they actually took a number of his poems. I think he mentioned in a previous episode that there was a journal that took a lot of his poems all at once. Smart move. But they republished this poem called Anku for the Halloween issue. What's astounding about this is that like the comments are going off. There seems to be like deep conversations going on. Yeah, so the poem is called Anku. It was originally published in At Length. I had Matthew read this the first time I interviewed him on Poetry Says. I'll never forget it, getting to hear this poem in his voice. And so I'm going to link to that episode and I'll give you the little time code in the notes so that you can skip straight to it if you want to. But it's a good interview. You should listen to it. Good move, The New Stylus. Go and check it out. So here's Elijah and me solving the problem of poetic legacy and how to transcend death. You have a t-shirt that's like, I feel like I recognize that stained glass window.
Yeah? Where do you think it's from?
I didn't realize it would be a test.
No, it's one of the big ones.
It's one of the big
ones.
ones, right? It's one of the big
Yeah.
ones. What is it? Like Notre Dame?
Yeah. It's Notre Dame. Easy.
Yes. All right,
Easy
Ken,
peasy.
I'm ready to progress to the next round. How are you feeling post Jeopardy?
uh, Good. I mean, I was dreading it coming out, not because I had anything particular to fear, but just because I didn't know how it was going to be received. I didn't, there's millions of people that watch sometimes, so I didn't know what would happen. And it turns out it not all that much. Like I did get several random friend requests on various platforms and a couple weird messages here and there. Apparently there was a lot of thirsting on Twitter, which I'm not on Twitter, but Laura was very happy to send me screenshots. But yeah, so it was a fun little moment of a bunch of strangers talking about you. But yeah, I think I got an up spike in listens on the show. But it's not like I became famous overnight or anything. It was just a
Look,
noticeable bump in who's paying attention to you. That's
it's
really all it is.
it's
Yeah.
all useful. What was the demographic on Twitter that was most into you?
I didn't look at the profiles of the Twitter users or the TikTok users, but based on the random women that friended me on Facebook, it seems to be like 30s to 40s white lady with glasses and brown hair. It seems to be like the real sweet spot.
Random women. He is not available. Getting
That's
married
right.
in like
Yeah, the
less than six
in
weeks.
this December. Yeah, I
This
will no longer be
December.
available. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
That's great. I mean, I think as I said over the chat, I'm not the type of person to love doing logistical things, even when it's
Mm,
for something exciting. Really
mm,
only when I'm planning a trip do I sort of get into the logistical matters of it, because then it's like, okay, well, where are we going and what are we going to be able to see? And so there's sort of a direct reward to the logistics being made. And of course, having a wedding is a great reward for logistics being made, but it's a bunch of stuff that you sort of need to get done in order for it to happen. And I know you would be great at it, but it's not really my cup of tea. I mean, and as I said, some parts of it are fun. Like writing vows is fun, and picking out the suit you're going to wear is fun. Like there are fun parts to it, but then just like juggling all the invitations and trying to get services from various places, and you need to make sure it all happens on the same day at the right time, and it's like sending a bunch of emails, and that part's not so fun. But I anticipate the wedding is going to be beautiful and
mm.
unforgettable. And yeah, and then we're going to go on our honeymoon, which I think will be the best part,
Where are you going
which
again?
will be we are going to the Alsace region of France, which is on the eastern side. It's right between France and Germany. Beautiful half timbered houses, really interesting mix of French and German culture. And then we're going down to Burgundy, to Dijon, which was the seat of the Burgundian dukes, which are a major interest for Laura in her medieval studies. So it'll be fun for her to see that.
It sounds beautiful. Yeah, I did look up the place where you guys are having the ceremony and reception. It looks incredible. Like I don't think you could have a bad time in that space, you know.
Yeah, and we just sort of fell into that. We had no idea that that existed when we moved here to
Mm,
Evanston. In Evanston, there's this really great, really cool, sort of obscure little museum called the Halim Time and Glass Museum. So there was this family, the Halim family, who they collected old clocks and they collected beautiful stained glass a la Tiffany. And so the museum is just full of beautiful Tiffany and Tiffany adjacent glass, and then beautiful Baroque and 19th century and 18th century clocks from around the world. And so the guests will get to browse through that. And then the venue itself, the part of the museum where we'll be having the wedding, has this beautiful Tiffany dome that's with wisteria. So like these purple wisteria flower patterns on the on the
that's one
on
of
the
my
dome. So
favorite flowers. Man, I love a wedding. And I wouldn't get married, but I looked at that place and I was like, I might get married there. Like
there you
that's
go.
pretty nice.
Well, if it could convince you to come over to Chicago,
I
then
know.
yeah, let's do
I
it.
know. I wish I had been able to scrape some money together, but that did not happen this year. But before you do all that, you got to go to ALSCW, which is this week. Is that right?
It's this coming weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks for fitting this in. I'm sure you're like very head down with prep and everything.
That's cool. I got to read all the essays, which was fun, and I'm gonna write a little introduction to the panel, and that's about it. And then I'm just excited to hang out with people, meet people.
Yeah, what are you expecting it will be like? Like, what's your panel on? And then what are you
Oh,
hoping to do?
oh yeah. So I have the panel is called Poetry and Myth, so right up my alley. I inherited this panel from Rachel Hoddes, actually. Rachel Hoddes was the one who proposed the panel, was the one who was going to lead it, and then she dropped out. She wasn't able to make it, and so she passed the baton on to me, which was wonderful. It was very generous of her, a great opportunity. And yeah, so she and I had inherited a bunch of people who had already signed on to do the poetry and myth panel with her. And I wasn't going to like reject any of those people. They seem nice. I don't know any of them, but cool. So there, that was like already a whole panel's worth of people. But then I was encouraged to also invite other people because ALCW wants more and more people to come. So I was like, okay, well, that's great. That's the best power to have. So I invited a bunch of people who I think would kill it on a poetry and myth panel. And I got together an amazing group of folks, most of whom you also know, that are going to be there. And so it'll be a really wonderful opportunity to hang out in Columbus, Ohio. And so because of that, there's going to be actually two panels. There's going to be two sessions of the panel. There's the panel one, which is the scholars and poets who I don't really know, and then there's panel two, or the session two, which are the people that I do know. So I anticipate two different vibes, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun in both cases.
Yeah, and just like hanging out afterwards will be the best part, I imagine.
Yeah,
ALSCW, I want to do a panel on ratbag poetics. I'm going to steal that title from the guy who makes the podcast here under that name. So get me on the bill next year. I
let's
can
do
do
it.
it. Yeah.
Talk to Ryan Wilson. He ran it for a while. He'll know how to get you in.
Scared of Ryan.
Oh, Ryan is such a sweetheart. Truly. I no, because I was scared of him too at first, because he has an extremely imposing headshot. But
Right?
wait, and of course, if you know him as this extremely learned, this arch this our archbishop of poetry sort of guy, then yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to be intimidated. But in person, he's such a nice and lovely and goofy person. So yeah, you
He
should
does
not be
seem like
afraid
he
of
has
him.
a really good sense of humor. Like that interview that you did with him, a lot of what he said, I was just like, but yeah, I could tell that he would like to laugh. So
Yeah, and his essay for ALSCW is just killer. It's so good. So I really hope that I think he's planning to add it to his introduction for the new edition of Pope's Iliad that he'll be putting out with Wiseblood at some point. But it's an essay on, or no, I'm sorry, Pope's Odd. It must be Pope's Odyssey. Yeah, Pope. Yeah, I mean that would only make sense. Pope's Odyssey. It's a paper on the Odyssey, and it's spectacular.
yeah, right. Like, is there any way to read all this stuff? Because you've written an essay too, which Matthew was saying was
Yeah,
brilliant.
well, and Matthew was very kind to say that. Yeah, I can send them to you. I can send you mine and Matthew's. Well, I guess Matthew could send it himself, and I could send you Ryan's. Actually, you know what I could do? I could just put you on the email thread where everyone sent their essays, and I don't think anyone would mind.
Don't do that. What would I say?
But no, no,
Hi,
you don't
hi
know.
guys,
No, no, no. Well, first of all, you already know most of these people. But second of all, it
hello.
wouldn't like you wouldn't have to say anything. I could just say, "Oh, I've added Alice so that she can look at your
So
papers."
she
I
can
actually already
lurk.
right. Well, I already did that actually with someone from session one who wanted to see what session two was all about. So
Yeah, cool.
it,
Okay.
you have precedent.
All right. Well, I'm excited by proxy. It sounds like a lovely weekend. And yeah, it's been such a year of Elijah.
Yeah, I'm just got to keep the train going.
That's
Hope to
right.
ride the momentum forward.
That's right. And so I've roped you into this conversation based on a phone call that we had the other day. And look, I'm sorry. This is just what it is being a podcaster. You're having like a nice, friendly conversation with someone, and halfway through, you're like, but this is great content. We have to make it into content.
Yeah,
And
it's all
so,
currency. Yeah,
so currency, yeah. And so my thought was maybe in terms of structure, it'd be nice to start out broad, talking about these questions of success and persona. And then maybe as we get towards the secret show sort of time mark, then we can go into like tactics. Because I want to get
yeah,
into the
yeah.
nitty gritty of like submitting and how you do that, kind of pushing forward like the actual work of it. Because I think, you know, I'm sure a lot of listeners already know a lot of the stuff that we're going to say, but every day someone's born who's never seen the Flintstones, like it could be it could be useful to somebody to just hear, like, this is how you write this is how you introduce yourself. This is like, and I've also got a list of Australian journals and editors that I was going to present as part of a workshop that I was going to do that nobody turned up for. So I really want to use that in this episode as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so here's my kickoff question. It's just a little question for you. What would success be for you in poetry? What can you imagine as you get towards the end of your life? You've lived a long, rich life in poetry, and you have the following things. What are they?
I think it could be a few different things, but the main effect that I would want to come away with, or the main impression I would want to come away with, is a a sense that my chances of being remembered are decent. And that could come about in a number of different ways. No one can guarantee that they will be remembered beyond their death. All sorts of things can happen. Cultural shifts can happen and you get totally lost to history. But as long as you've done your best to ensure that the world as you leave it when you die remembers you and, has been influenced by you in a way that's hard to deny and hard to cover over, I think that is as good as you're going to get.
So concretely, what's that going to look like, though? Like, how will you know?
I think it's almost hard to quantify, but I think that knowing maybe the impact that you've had on, assuming you're an old poet by the time you die, the impact that you've had on successive generations of poets. It's hard to say because like very concrete quantitative things like prizes, I don't think really matter at all. I think readership is a better metric, how many people are reading you. But again, it's like Rod McEwen had an enormous readership and no one reads him now. So it's, that's pretty airy as well. There's not very many things you can count on. I think maybe one good thing would be being added to school curricula. Like if you become part of that canon, I think that is a better bet than most that you will be held on to for a while. And yeah, I mean people love to tear down canons these days, but I think that having a canon is how you have some idea of what will be remembered. I mean, that's the whole point of a canon, that this is what we're preserving. So if you are being written up, I think it's less important that you say get a Pulitzer or get a Nobel Prize in Literature, and it's more important that you see important magazines and blogs and just people in general ranking you consistently among, say the best works of the past 10 years, the past 20 years, the past 50 years in a certain category. People seeing that or believing that what you offered was substantial enough to last and be remembered, and that if your work is not read, that person is missing something about this age that you're in. Right. So like we are in 2025, and if and the work that I write that will be remembered probably mostly will not be from this decade, but say you're looking back, someone 150 years is looking back on poetry from the first half of the 21st century, then you would want to have some idea that their picture of what poetry looked like in the first half of the 21st century wouldn't really be complete if your name wasn't in it.
Shit, this is a tall order. This is. Did I ever tell you about my great uncle Jack?
I don't think so.
So, my great uncle, my paternal grandmother's brother, was a poet called John Blight. And both he and my grandmother were writers. My grandmother wrote for a little tiny journal called Literature in North Queensland, and she wrote short stories. She was an utterly brilliant writer. I've read all her stuff because a member of the family collected it all into a little spiral bound stack of paper. I've read all her short stories and her poetry, and she was killer. And she had a brother called John, and John was a poet, and he was, in his time, we're talking sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, really well regarded, really well known. He had books out. It's funny, like I thought he had a couple of books out. Every time I go to this big secondhand bookshop in Brisbane, which is around where he lived, I keep finding new books, and I've started to realize that he probably published somewhere in the order of like 10 books over his lifetime. He had a selected with the University of Queensland Press, which is a major publisher then and still is now. He's in pretty much every Australian poetry anthology that was published around that time. So, like The Penguin and things like that. And he was on the school curriculum with this poem called Death of a Whale, which is like he was known for his sea sonnets, which
That's
is
cool.
sort of hilarious. Um, And in his, I suppose his best sea sonnet was this one called Death of a Whale. It's a very messagey kind of sonnet. Like it's got a very like clear lesson in it. So it makes sense that it's on
Mhm.
school curriculum. But like I'm sure you can predict where I'm heading with this. Like no one has heard of John Blight in 2025. And I sent you this little essay that A. Stallings wrote about Anthony Hecht, and she points out in the first, actually, it's about David Yezzie's book about Anthony Hecht. And what she points out in the first paragraph of that is if you're going to transcend death in any way as a poet, what you want is for someone to come along, probably in the first 10 years after you die, and write that biography. And I think that's what Uncle Jack never got. And, you know, potentially it should be me who's writing this book, but I don't really want to.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think having at bet, as much as you can, an army of people in your corner who are younger than
Yes.
you, who are going
Yes.
to carry on your legacy. So maybe that, I mean, maybe that's the answer is that when you are on your deathbed, you can
Make
say,
sure you
okay,
have
well,
young friends.
I have 10 young friends waiting in the wings to carry on my legacy for at least the next couple
It's
generations.
not creepy at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully they're in high places, people who, other people will listen to. But also any young friend at all, right? Because that's how Kafka's work was saved, was that he had one friend who was not like a big deal in the literary world, as far as I remember, but Kafka was going to destroy all his work, and he like made his friend promise to get rid of all of it, and then the friend didn't. He sent it out a bunch of places, and then Kafka became Kafka. And a very similar, well, not, I mean, I don't think he asked his work to be destroyed, but a similar sort of thing happened with Van Gogh, right? Where Van Gogh was promoted tirelessly by one of his relatives, and then that's how he got to be who he was. And I think I don't want to be just making stuff up here, but I think Emily Dickinson had a similar situation. Like there,
Let's say she did.
you know,
Doesn't we're not
yeah,
on Jeopardy anymore.
I'm pretty sure she had a similar situation.
Yeah.
Or even, I mean, and this is a more unsavory example, but like Nietzsche's sister, I think, who became, who was a Nazi and was enthusiastic about interpreting her brother's works in Nazi-esque ways, and then that turned on the Nazi Party to Nietzsche, and of course that wasn't great, but it did enhance his name in his native country. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of these examples where either you have family members or friends who are just really strong, enthusiastic advocates for you. And that's going to increase the likelihood that you will last immeasurably, I think.
But I guess the other thing that we're really saying here is that it's idiosyncratic, right? Like it's case by case. You could have a Nietzsche situation, you could have a Kafka situation. Like you're just not going to know. I mean, I'm still in this Milton reading group. We're trying to read Paradise Regained. It's terrible. But the other week, Justin Clemens, who runs the group, was just basically outlining the political situation around Milton as he's writing Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, and then as he's coming to the end of his life. And I guess I kind of knew this, but didn't properly understand how destitute he was as he's dying. He's selling off manuscripts just to pay the rent, essentially. And so I guess that's the other thing is if we're going to look at it from this perspective of how's it going to feel like as you're dying. I mean, Van Gogh probably didn't feel very good. Nietzsche probably didn't feel very good, and Milton probably didn't feel very good either. Like they were probably all just like,
No, and
shit.
Keats was convinced that he was going to be forgotten, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
whole point of his tombstone.
Yeah.
A young poet might say, "Oh, I would love to have been Keats," but you really wouldn't have because he
No, no,
he
that's such a bad
he had
idea.
right, he had a really miserable life, and as even though he is one of the most well-read and most celebrated poets in English, he has never gotten to appreciate that, and at no point in his life did he even have an inkling that that was really going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so maybe I'm coming at this from the wrong angle because, like, in fact, is you just can't know. You can't know, even if you die with a bunch of young friends, one of whom happens to be in the Nazi party around you, you still, there's no guarantee that it's going to be okay.
No, but you can at least you can line up some ducks so that it's a little bit more likely.
Yeah.
And it helps obviously if you've had a career over the course of the last several decades where you know that you've influenced a lot of writers who are now coming up and are heavily involved in the scene, and you've had lots of people write nice articles about you, et cetera, and you've had people read you, all that. So it's all comfort, but it's no guarantee again.
So what? what do you want to do in more of the near term so that you have like, let's say the next 10 years, so that you have some kind of feeling that those ducks are being lined up?
Well, I think the main thing that I'm trying to do right now, other than just continuing to make the show, continuing to write and submit poems, publish essays, all that stuff, which is just ongoing. I mean, that's the project until you die, right? It's just to do those things over and over again, rinse and repeat. I think getting a book out, and then when I get the book out, to really just crusade for it. Not hopefully in a super obnoxious way where I'm like, forcing it upon every acquaintance that I meet, but really, but promoting it in the sense of like really making sure that you get it in as many ears as possible, whether that means going on podcasts or doing readings or busking or going into or putting poetry into unfamiliar places, places where poetry normally isn't found, so that you can grow your audience. That's, I think, a really important point. That's the one thing that I really admire Matt Wall for, is that he really pushes that. I totally agree with him on that. Is that you need, if you're a poet complaining about how no one reads poetry except other poets, but then all the circles you're running in are poetry circles, what do you expect to happen? Like, you need to get your poetry out into other dimensions, other worlds, other subcultures.
Yeah, I
And
agree. I think Matt is entirely right about that. And the one thing that I wish for is like 10% of his energy or your energy. Like, because I think you could do that. Like, I have no doubt that when this book comes out and whoever's got it in their submission pile at the moment, hurry the fuck up. Like, when that book exists, you will push it. And you probably will push it to the point of being obnoxious, but that's actually not a huge problem because the payoff is probably worth a bit of that.
right, yeah, I mean, I hope to preserve some dignity, but yeah, but yeah, I mean, that's the idea, because
Yeah,
yeah, I don't
some.
right, so yeah, there's a balance, of course,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I don't I get frustrated when I see poets who are so apologetic about pushing their work. It's like, yeah, I understand that it feels weird to put yourself out in the world and to say that something you did was good, but if you didn't think that what you did was good, why did you go to the trouble to try to write and publish it in the first place? Like, if you publish it, if you go to the trouble to submit to magazines, get the work published, to go through all of that, which is a years long process, then clearly you believe, at least I hope you believe, in the work that you're producing. And if that's the case, why not try to sell the hell out of it? If you think that you have something really good, then yeah, put it out into the world as much as you can.
I mean, it's hard to argue with, but as one of those like fairly apologetic poets, I guess I don't know. I don't know why. I feel much more comfortable helping other people's work flourish and thrive. Like, I remember saying to my older sister, who for much of my life is very much my hero, I remember saying to her at one point, I'm going to be a poet and I'm going to write so many books. I'm going to have a whole shelf full of my books. And she said to me, well, you better hurry up then. And I was a bit sort of chastened. But having put out a tiny little chapbook and a first book, I've realized that the possibility of doing that, like I mean, it's such a stupid measure, right? Because it's about literal shelf space to begin with. And there is a poet over here in Australia who everyone's dark on because he has published his collected as two gigantic volumes that are like as thick as bricks, and everyone's just like, "What the fuck are you doing, man? That is just
Right. Yeah. No
stupid.
one's going to
Nobody
read that.
nobody
Yeah.
wants that." But like what I realized after I kind of got over that very juvenile idea, and I think at the time like 14 years old, was that the shelf I actually want and the shelf that I'm building right here next to my desk is a shelf of books that I've had that have my fingerprints on them.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
like the book that won the Mary Gilmore the year that I was on that prize panel, I fought for that book. The other two judges wanted to go with something else. I mean, they agreed with me in the end, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
they were like, ah, could be this, could be that. And I'm like, it's fucking this book, you guys. Like, don't be stupid. It's this one. And so that's their books that I've launched, books that like Lou's book, Golden Repair, which is fucking fantastic, like that I've edited the poems in. And it feels good. It feels good to look over there and just be like, oh, I'm actually contributing. Like I'm actually helping. And that feels much more satisfying to me than promoting my own work. But I agree with you. I do. Like I know you're right. I know Matt's right. Like it's important to push your own stuff. It's
Yeah,
just
but what
uncomfortable.
you're saying is extremely wise as well. Like I think if you're going to die with some comfort that you have a legacy that matters, then it's better to look at it the way you are. Because whether an individual name such as your own is remembered is totally out of your hands. But if you know that you've had your tendrils in the creation of so many different things, some of that stuff is bound to last, right? At least in certain circles, in certain communities, hopefully. Or even if that stuff doesn't last, it's made an impact on things that will last. And so
Yeah.
if you're not attached to your particular name, but are rather just attached to the idea that you've made a difference somehow in the scene for the better, then yeah, you can find a way to die happy that way also.
Yeah, and it's not even like I think for me, it's not even like I'm nowhere near as attached, I don't think, to this idea of lasting or having a legacy beyond my death. It just doesn't, and I think that a lot of that just comes from living and working in the Australian context where it's kind of like you might last, but you're still sort of lasting in this context, which is on a global scale, like, like people probably know Murray and maybe one or two people know Forbes, but
Yeah,
that's
but
it.
it's interesting because, and I remember we were talking about this on the phone, having a smaller community like that you're operating in, I feel like it could go both ways. Like you could say, oh, this is small potatoes. This doesn't really matter that much on a global scale anyway. Or you could say, oh, well, since this is actually a smaller pond, I can be a bigger fish in it. And therefore, it's actually more realistic of me to say, I want to try to be like a main person, a canonical person within this smaller context, right? Like
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to be a giant of world literature is almost impossible.
Mm.
First of all achieve that, and second of all to feel any kind of guarantee that you've achieved that within your lifetime. But to be an important Australian poet in the scene, and then to have some confidence that your name will last in the annals of Australian poetry, or in the Australian poetry anthologies, that's a more reasonable goal, right? Like I was just reading about, because I was like, I don't know anything about Romanian poetry. I was like looking up Romanian poets and I was looking at Romania specifically because it's a Romance language, so it's like more accessible to me than some other Eastern European languages. There's this one poet, I don't remember his name, ironically enough, but because I just looked at it the other day. But there's this one poet who's like the guy in Romania.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I've never heard of this person, but there's like over like there's so, like several hundred statues of him in Romania, like in like part, different towns, different cities, rural areas. Like they love this guy. It's like, yeah, that's a real kind of immortality. That's a kind of success. Like, I don't know who this guy is. I've never read him. I don't even know if there are any accessible English translations of him, but Romanians love him. It's like, it's like being big in Japan. It's like, well, except Japan is much bigger than Romania, but it's like,
Yeah,
that's a real success. That's a real thing that one could strive for.
yeah. I want to read this paragraph from an article that was written about 12, 13 years ago it was called The Poet Tasters by this guy, Ben Etherington. And the article itself is like a review of reviewing in Australia. It's a very like labor intensive thing that Ben did where he read every single poetry review published in a single year. But as he's introducing this, he writes a bit about the context of like what it is to write and publish in Australia. And I just want to read this paragraph just because I think it's such a brilliant summation of what it is to work here. He says, the total revenue of all Australian poetry volumes in any given year would struggle to match the advance for a mid-list novelist. The art form subsists in an economy of university posts, writing courses, postgraduate scholarships, literary prizes, government grants, fellowships, philanthropy, and above all, self-funding. Concerns about commercialism might be rare, but a lingering sense of hobbyism can afflict the vocation. Just about anyone who has decided that poetry is their thing and who has enough private means and persistence can be confident of edging their way into a scene like Australia's. Even long-established poets can be nagged by the feeling that the aesthetic communities from which they gain recognition only reflect back the effort they put in. Miss a few readings, take a break from publishing, leave an editorial post, and you and your work might disappear. I'm feeling that very acutely right now because I miss readings all the time. I haven't published
Mhm.
since early 2020 and I never launched that book. I've stopped publishing Poetry Says. And so I effectively, like right now, don't really exist in any in
You've
any significant
committed
way.
poetic seppuku, yeah.
Yeah,
No, but I
yeah,
mean
yeah.
that's not really the goal though, right? Like the goal is not to remain, it's not to have some sort of cachet in this like small little community. The goal is to have readers and to make an impact on readers, right? And I think that remaining within this small little pool of people who just glad hand each other, reading after reading, it's not really where you want to stay. Like
Well,
you
it's
want to
funny
be
though
able to break through
because
that.
yeah, it's you're right. You're absolutely right, but it's funny because like particularly living and working in Melbourne, you can get so entirely distracted by the glad handing because there's a incredibly vibrant, always overloaded social scene that happens here. Like last week, there were like three big poetry parties that I didn't go to. I was saying to Tom last night, like, if I went, I could hustle. I'd probably get more opportunities. I'd be more out there, but I would also be almost instantly miserable because I would be thinking of things in those terms of like, did I say the right? Oh God, I got that person's name wrong. Oh my God, I said that stupid fucking thing. Okay, who do I need to email? What do I need to do? Like just that. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't be writing. And I said to him, like, I can't approach things in that way because it makes me instantly miserable. And I just want to write good stuff. Like that's the only thing that feels good is
Yeah, I
trying
mean,
to
and
write good
that's
stuff.
the really horrible thing about poets not being in a position to have any patrons whatsoever is that, we are forced to do jobs that are often not temperamentally suited to us. And it's a really tall order to say, hey, you be a good poet, but also be a really good salesman, also be a really good diplomat within the specific social circle, also have all the tireless energy to continuously promote yourself on social media. It's like there's too many things to check off. And even if you manage to do all of those things, it's going to exhaust you. And you can't be happy doing that unless you're the most extroverted extrovert.
Yeah.
But that is another thing though, is that I think there are people who do go to these readings and do all the glad handing and the peacocking, etc. And that's the existential meaning that they're getting is being part of that community rather than
Mm.
writing and trying to make sure that the work lasts. I think that there are some people maybe who go into poetry with some sort of ambition to last, or people can get into poetry for all sorts of reasons. But I think maybe what ends up happening is that there are people who, if they don't have this sort of daimonic ambition like I do or like Cameron does, that they sort of they ease their existential nourishment shifts. It shifts from trying to create immortal work into, oh, I'm a poet doing poetry things among poets, and that's cool, and that's what I like to do, and that's the ocean I like to swim in, and that's all I need is to keep doing that. And so there are people who derive who are motivated to do those things because they actually enjoy doing those things. They are existentially nourished by it. I I love being around certain poets who I really admire. I love being around. I've developed, I've said this many times. I've developed such a really beautiful, valuable friend group over the last few years, among people who share similar interests to mine. But that doesn't assuage the anxiety I have about my legacy or my own work. Like it's a separate thing, and I mean it's a complementary thing. Having these friends inspires me to be better and to do more and helps me find out opportunities and learn from them. But it's no substitute.
I came up with a little formula that I wanted to put to you, which is that to be really, really successful, for lack of a better word, I don't really think that that's the word we want to use here, but But to really get somewhere in your lifetime as a poet, you need to have chops, you need to have grit, and you need to have charm. And most poets have one and a half of those. I think I have
Yeah.
grit and a little bit of charm. I don't have chops. I know that.
Oh, you've developed some serious chops, I'd say, Alice.
It's all constructed from the ground up though. I don't have any native talent.
I think that's your self-doubt talking. I don't know that you are the best person to judge that.
Well, maybe not, but I don't mind that. I'm like, it's okay. I think if you figure out like which of these things do you have, and then where do you need to like I know I need to work really hard. I need to rely on my grit so that I can write a poem that like actually looks like it came from talent, and and then I can maybe use like a little bit of charm to get it out there. And for other people, they're just incredibly innately like Lou is like this. Lou is just she's infuriating because she just we've got this little thing that we're doing each month. We're meeting up and just writing, just sharing with each other whatever we've written that month. And like the first time we met up, she was like, "Oh yeah, I just wrote this," and I'm like, "Well, it's fuck, man, really?" Like, and I sent her these drafts, which were very much in progress, thinking she was going to send me something in progress. And it was a work in progress, but it was just so done because that's just how it comes out for her. Yeah, anyway, I'm rambling here, but that's my formula. Chops, grit, and charm.
Yeah. Yeah, and energy, which I guess is part of grit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you need to have that perseverance. It's tough. I mean, poets, if poets could have agents, that would that would solve a lot of problems.
I
Well, it
don't,
would
and
create a
that's,
lot of problems
yeah,
too. But yeah,
yeah. I feel like that's probably what I should be though, is somebody's agent. I want to change, I want to shift the conversation a little bit before we move on to our secret show part of the conversation. Because part of the reason I wanted to sit you down and talk about all this is I wanted to get into this question of the persona, the public persona. I think being podcasters, we both have a public persona, and
totally.
and in your case, my feeling is that your public persona is like quite a bit more severe than your actual who you actually are sort of day to day. Definitely who
Yeah.
I experience you to be.
Yeah, yeah. And this is something we were talking about on the phone, which it, I feel like I know myself pretty well, but this part of me, this impulse, is a bit of a mystery even to myself, which is that I feel like the self that I want to project and the self that I want to preserve is a more serious, grand, stern version of myself than the self that I am in daily life. Which, if you know me, you know how sanguine and goofy I can be. You know, I'm a pretty cheerful person, I would say. Um, but then again, I think that the self that's reflected in my poetry and to a certain extent on the podcast is not fake. Like it's also a part of myself. And maybe this is getting sort of at the root of it is that there is a self that I'm most comfortable being socially. And then there's another self which is sort of it's not even hidden because I try to hide it, but it's just a part of the self that doesn't express that I don't express naturally in day-to-day social interactions, but that I feel is a deep part of myself. And it's the part of myself that I feel activated when I listen to music or when I'm hiking or working out or engaged in some work of art intensely. And that's this kind of more stony, steely, bestial, hard self. And so I think I try to channel that because it doesn't naturally, I'm not naturally that way socially. I think I try to channel that side of myself into my work. But it's still sort of a riddle to me because it's like, well, you want your name to last, you want a certain part of yourself to last, but why that part? And if it's only that part, then is it really you? And you know, I think it's not really you. Like it's even if your name is remembered, even if Elijah Blumoff is remembered for eternity, it's really a name and an idea, and it's not yourself. You know, it's obviously not your consciousness, and it's not even like a true representation of your personality.
Yeah, it's a character.
Right. Yeah, it's a character. So you're striving so much to for this sort of this vicarious immortality, and then the deep bewildering irony of it is that it's not even you that would survive. Like on the very on the very very low chance that your work does survive, it's not the you that you are and that other people know you to be. It's like one constructed thing that you've done. And I think that gets to part of the appeal for me is that it's less important to me that people know all about me. And it's more, and this my work, it's not really that personal. It's more important to me that people admire things that I've done.
And you're also trying to communicate ideas in your work rather than personality. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I like I read a fair amount of dramatic work, including dramatic monologues, and so I want there to be personality in the poems. It's just that doesn't have to be mine. And yeah, and maybe there is a personality, but it is that sort of constructed, stern, monumental self that I've been talking about. It's like that's the voice that I inhabit when I write, and that's the voice that I want to come across in the poems. It's just that's a certain facet of myself. And one thing that we were talking about also is that that may be a sort of self-sabotage for me to focus on that, right? Because this stern monumental self is maybe less charming, is maybe less it's less appealing to a wider audience than the self that I actually am in real life or in person. But I just don't have the same desire to preserve that self in my work.
Mm.
I don't know. It's weird. It's maybe it's connected to the way I feel like about comedy and drama or comedy and tragedy. It's like, people often get on my case and like I totally understand like that, I'm not really that interested in comedies. I'm not that interested in unserious sort of funny work. I think my perspective on it is that I can have lots of fun and laughs in real life. Like that's where I get all my nourishment of that sort. And like I don't need comedies to cheer me up because I have friends and I can talk to them and I can have fun with them and I can go do cool experiences and that can, cheer me. I don't need art to cheer me. I feel like what art is good for me is like being able to process the darker, more existential thoughts that I have.
Mm.
And so that's why I'm geared almost exclusively towards dark, serious work.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if I was your agent, I would want to draw out a little bit more of your goofy side into, I mean, that's kind of why I've got you on the call today, because I want people to hear that side of you, because I know it's there. And I've said this to you before in various ways, but like my concern is that if people only get the stern kind of fire and brimstone preacher, as you were saying the other day in the chat, that people will turn off, or a lot of people will turn off, some people will turn off, and they'll miss what you're actually doing because they feel like they're in trouble.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you, would you say that you write the work you write because it's the kind of work that you would want to read?
Yeah, no, I do. I do. Yeah. I
Yeah. So I
totally
think I
just
think
write what I want
that's
to read.
that's yeah, that's sort of how I feel. It's
That's what you're
it's
doing.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's because again, like I think that I have a pretty winning personality. I would, I think that people are not wrong to be friends with me. Like I think it's not I think I can be charming enough in those situations. But that's not the person that I necessarily want to engage with on the page. I, for whatever reason, want to engage with a stern grand persona. It's one reason why like lots of people find Milton insufferable, like Matthew, and to a certain extent you, I would imagine. But I love opening it and being like and he's like, of man's first disobedience. I'm like, yes, tell it. Like let's get into, the cosmic nature of human beings and sin and the gods. It's like we're talking real baseball here.
Yeah, I mean, like just as a side note, I think having spent a couple of years now with Milton every week, I've gone well past worrying about his grandeur, and I'm just like fascinated by his project and the way he the way he does things, and honestly, like the tragedy of his personal circumstances, like
Yeah.
the fact that he had to live through this revolution that failed and come so close to being put to death, and then just kind of only just scraping out of that, and then living out the end of his life in this sort of destitute way. But I mean, that's the thing about reading Paradise Regained, is like it's flat and boring, but the whole time he's just like, look, if we really believe in this, if we're really down with Jesus, like we're not worried about any of this material stuff, because
Hmm.
Jesus is he's going to sort it out. Just like, really, you're not
Yeah.
really, you actually feel that way. Like that's amazing. Anyway, that's just my little side rant about Milton.
Yeah. Well, and I think you need people to, no matter how outlandish it is, you need writers to believe in something very strongly. I think that's how you get the best work, is people who really believe in the true value of what they're doing. And it's not, I don't think that they necessarily have to believe that they're the Messiah, but I think they have to
Yeah.
I think they have to believe that what they're doing is, even if they don't necessarily believe that they're a genius or believe that their work is the greatest thing since sliced bread, they do believe that what they're trying to convey is of utmost urgency and of utmost value. And they're, at least they're struggling to do that, whether they, in their own eyes, they fail or not.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm like, do I believe that what I'm doing is of utmost value? Well, certainly not. Like, it's not utmost anything. But like,
Yeah, well, and
I
I'm talking from my own, like,
no,
with my
no,
own Elijah goggles on, and so, like,
that's
this is the
okay.
sort
That's
of thing that I'm, like, most interested in, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, that's okay. No,
Yeah.
I'm definitely not criticizing that point of view. It's just like when you talk about these things, I always run it through my own filter of like experience and expectation, and think like, all right, well, what part of that fits for me? And I think at the moment it's like what's important to me is the connection with the reader, even if it's just a single reader. Like even if I'm writing a text message, I really want the person on the other end to like feel like I really cared about what I said, and for it to
Yeah,
like
but
affect
that's a
them in some
profound
way.
thing.
Yeah,
That is a profound thing.
I guess. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I feel the same way if I'm like when I'm writing a poem or an essay, or making, like that was the great pleasure of making the show, was I did have a persona, and I thought of the persona of Alice on the show as different to me, the person. But it was still really satisfying when I would hear from people who felt like, particularly as I was ending the show, when I heard from people who felt like that voice had mattered to them. I mean, not to get
Yeah.
like too ridiculous, but that is kind of why like I adore podcasting, is because it's just like we're so intimate with the people that we're speaking to. And to know that I got to kind of be there when people were feeling shitty or lonely or bored or folding laundry or whatever. Like
Mhm.
that meant a great deal.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, you feel like you matter in those circumstances, right? Like this, it's
Yeah,
back
yeah, I
to,
did. I did. Yeah.
what feels like you're doing something substantial to make a difference. It might not last forever, but it's
No.
affecting someone real right now, and I think that's nourishment that we all strive for. I am
Yeah.
interested though in, because I feel like I do try to bring in sort of my more goofy side, or my drier side on the podcast from time to time.
You
I feel
do.
like, but it is a more constructed version of myself than I think or at least it seems that way, than your persona on Poetry Says was, compared to your real self. Like it seems to me like the Venn diagram of you versus your persona, there's more overlap, or at least it seems that way. Like it's like I'm convinced when I listen to you on your show that that's you, and it's not that I don't, I don't believe that there's a persona, or no, there obviously is a persona, but I'm curious what you would say is the main difference, or what the main differences are between yourself in real life versus your persona, because I feel like your persona is very believable as a real flesh and blood person.
Yeah, I mean I think this is such a funny word that comes from reality television, but she's me with glam, like full face of makeup, you know. That
Mhm.
is as charming, as funny, as interesting as I can possibly be. because I've edited out all the pauses, all the ums, all the tripping, like every single bit where I didn't
Sure, sure, yeah.
sound exactly how I wanted to sound. And then I put fucking music beds all over it. So like, I say something and then like drop in some national and it's just like, oh, cool. Like I get to be myself with my red lipstick and my leather jacket, which I no longer own. And that's fun. But the reality is, I spend a lot of time in my pajamas with very bad hair. Like that, that's me.
But the thing is, you're also very self-deprecating on the show. So it's not as if one couldn't imagine the Alice of the show being in pajamas and disheveled, etc.
Well, good. That's good. Should, we didn't talk at all about Ernest Becker, which was the whole point of getting it. Like, do we want to talk about that? Do we want to switch gears now and talk about like tactics and stuff? What do you want to do?
Yeah, only to the extent that it interests you, because I know that I kind of threw that at you. But if you found something interesting, if you even if it's just something from the middle of the of what I
Yeah.
sent you to pull out.
Well, you sent me a couple of episodes of Philosophize This, which I were you listening to that before you started making Versecraft? Because I feel it shares some DNA with.
It does kind of. I'd
Yeah.
listen to like maybe like an episode of it. I'm
Okay.
not like I'm not a consistent listener of any podcast except for Poetry Says when it existed and SLEERICKETS. But yeah, I'd heard like maybe an episode or so just because in the early I think it was like even in my early 20s because this podcast has been around for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I just kind of knew it, even though I'd never actually listened to it. But it's just like little half-hour chunks of philosophy explained by a smart, interesting guy. And these two episodes are about Ernest Becker, who was writing, publishing in the 60s and 70s. And the books that people might know of his are The Denial of Death. And are there other ones that
Hmm.
people would know of?
That's definitely the most famous one.
That's the one.
He won the Pulitzer for that one, and then but he also I think this book was published posthumously. The Escape from Evil is his second book, which is
Yeah.
sort of it's like a part two to the ideas that he discusses in The Denial of Death.
I can't say that I followed every single point, but one of the things I liked about what he said was this idea that culture and religion serve the same purpose for people, which is this escape from death consciousness, death awareness of death. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
you can use religion to do that, but you can also use culture the way that we do as poets.
Yeah, and the idea of the immortality project, which is it's what each of us individually does to feel meaningful in the world and to establish some kind of legacy, whether that means that our name specifically will live on, or whether it just means that we're attaching ourselves to a larger project that has been going on for generations that we feel is valuable and that we want to continue. We each have an individual immortality project, and all of our immortality projects together are what constitute society, what constitute civilization. And we often inherit these immortality projects from culture. That's like one of the main things that culture does is it provides avenues of meaning for us. Like so you can be a doctor or a politician or a poet or what have you, but you're following in a line of tradition that has been established by your culture. There's a universe of values and of meaning that you are already equipped with when you're born, or I mean you become equipped with as you grow up in a certain society, and then you draw upon that to decide how am I going to make the difference that I want to make in the world based on what I value, what I'm good at, and what society values.
Yeah.
And in every case, the idea is by doing this, the fact that I'm going to die and the fact that what I am may be insignificant hurts less.
And what I thought was really interesting was when he talked about conflict between immortality projects. And this made a lot of sense to me when he talked about, if your immortality project comes into conflict with mine in some way,
Mm-hmm.
even if we are both poets, but the way that you approach poetry threatens the way I approach poetry because poetry is my immortality project. I feel like you are trying to kill me.
Yes, and that is so important. I think it's one of the best insights that he has
It's so
because
good.
this explains Trump. It explains totalitarianisms of every kind. It explains all the awful atrocities that we commit against each other. Because everyone who who engages in these awful things, they believe that they're in the right, and they believe that by exterminating the other, that they're doing something virtuous, or that they have to do that in order to continue their lives in the way that in the only way that is meaningful for them to continue it. So I think it's really valuable to be able to recognize that when someone comes into conflict with someone else, or when you come into conflict with someone else, that what is stirring your ire on a very deep level is, oh, this person is reminding me that I'm going to die and that what I might do is insignificant.
Yeah, I'm going to die without significance.
Right, because if what, yeah, as the podcast says, if what, the idea is, if what this person is saying is true, then I mean nothing. Or then what I've dedicated my life to means nothing. And
Yeah,
that, of
if
course, that's going to summon chthonic forces in yourself.
totally, like if
Yeah.
my cousin comes to me and is like, "Oh, have you read?" Like, oh God, I went to my niece's place and she's just started studying creative writing and she's got Rupi Kaur's The Sun and Her Flowers next to her bed. And I try to be sanguine about it, but this is part of me. It's just like, no, no, don't, don't read that book. There's so many better things you could read. But of course, part of me is deeply threatened by
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of poetry because it feels like in a way, it feels like it cancels out what I'm trying to do, and that it has won and will continue to win, and like
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my
It's
in my
like,
lifetime at least. Yeah.
yeah, people can ask you, like, oh, why do you care so much about this issue? Why do you care so much about how people define poetry? Well, it's because poetry is what I've dedicated my life to. So
Yeah.
even though it's not an existential matter for you, it is for me,
It is for me. Yeah.
right? And this is actually one of the reasons I thought that we should talk about Becker was because I was reminded of Becker so strongly when Matthew was talking about AI, and he was saying like this chill that he feels when people talk about AI. I was like, that's because his immortality project is being threatened. That's what's happening. It's like that's the language that you can, Becker gives us this language with which we can talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it was extremely useful to kind of hear it explained all in that way. He talks about things functioning as a transference object. So for me, poetry is my transference object. And also potentially, I think for me specifically, this is like a very wishy-washy way of saying it, but like being a positive force in the lives of other people is like I get so much satisfaction out of helping others. And like earlier in my life, that became very toxic and exhausting. But now that I'm a bit older, I can kind of approach that sort of thing in a healthier way. And I can be like, I can help you and I will help you and I have the energy to help you. Or I actually can't right now. And I'm not, I'm only going to do this and get depleted and feel resentful. But I think that too is a transference object, even though it might sound very like lofty and what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's admirable, but it's still a transference object. It's still what I'm doing because I want to feel important, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm thinking of the Gwendolyn Brooks poem that Matthew shared as well. Like for the woman who has children and the children move out of the house, right? Like her immortality project has basically ended, right? Like she's no longer involved in being important in people's lives in the way that she has attached herself to. And the children, her transference objects, are now gone. Right. So it's like then yeah, I mean, of course you're gonna think about death at that point because the thing that you've relied on, the idol that you've made to stave that off is gone. And I think and not to derail what we were talking about, but this leads what I think is to Becker's great conclusion, which is that the only way to have any kind of serenity or stability in life is to have your transference object, have your immortality project be involved in something which cannot die. And the only thing that there is existence itself or God. And so of course it's like, oh yeah, so of course you're gonna end up with God. But it's
Oh
like
my God.
he goes through all the work, he goes through all the work of like explaining his system, all the different ways that people, da
But
da da
where
da
does
da.
that leave
But it,
somebody who doesn't believe in God then? Like, what are they
but it's
going to do?
but it doesn't like though I think the way that you get to God through his thought is not through a theological argument. It's not like trying to prove that God exists. It's more
Okay.
like the thing to which I can attach myself, the only thing that will last, that can never be threatened, and that will ensure that I never, I mean, not never have a crisis, but that I will never lose this thing, or I will never have to fight someone in order to retain this thing. The only object is reality itself. And it doesn't have to be a human, it doesn't have to be the biblical God. It doesn't have to be any kind of anthropomorphized version of God, but you have to invest your powers of meaning in reality, which is part of what I try to do, and it's very essential to my spiritual outlook. It's definitely brought up in the Job essay, which I'm doing for ALSCW, which I can send to you. But yeah, having a love and devotion to this, insane reality that we're in, and submitting to it, and recognizing that all meaning is found in that thing. I mean, and it's perfectly translatable to like the idea of the golden calf, right? The Israelites who are out in the desert in Egypt, who are waiting for Moses to come down from Sinai, they get fed up with waiting. They get restless because, first of all, Moses has been up there a long time. They don't know what he's doing. And the God that they've been asked to worship is invisible. They don't know him. He's never spoken to them. He might speak to Moses, but he's never spoken to them. There's nothing that they can see. There's nothing that they can attach themselves to. What are they even worshiping? It's air. And having been raised in polytheistic Egypt, they expect to be able to have their gods be tangible, at least to some extent. I think we all expect our gods to be tangible to some extent. It's why we grasp after things that are less than the universe itself, less than reality itself. And so they take their valuables, they take their jewelry, their earrings, their bracelets, and they give them up. They sacrifice them to their transference object, which is a literal idol, which is the golden calf. They are willing to give up all of these things, and just like we in real life we are willing to sacrifice so much of ourselves in order to have this transference object, which can be the dynamic of which can create a tangible immortality project for ourselves. We are willing to give up our gold so that we can have this golden calf in front of us that we can worship. And then what happens is, Moses comes down, is furious. He smashes the tablets, which means that he has to go back up and get them again. And as punishment, part of punishment, he commands that the golden calf be melted down into whatever water source they're near, and then the people have to drink it. They have to drink the water with their own gold in it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's brutal.
This story is
um,
intense.
oh,
I never heard
right,
this before.
Yeah, I mean the golden calf is such a great story, and the composer, the modernist composer Arnold Schoenberg, who pioneered the 12-tone system of music, sort of breaking away from tonality. He struggled a lot with his Judaism because he was in an extremely anti-Semitic climate. He's living in Austria, with the rise of Hitler, and he converted to Catholicism for a while. But then when he realized how much his identity as a Jew was still keeping him oppressed, it was like, okay, never mind. Like, I'm going to go back to being Jewish, and fuck you guys. And then he wrote this opera called Moses and Aaron, and it's all about this dynamic of surrounding the golden calf, of Moses being the one saying, we need to have the people rise up to worship this thing, which maybe they don't understand, but which is the real thing. And then Aaron on the other side saying, well, actually, that's pie in the sky. What we need is something for the people to be able to actually attach themselves to. We need some kind of noble lie, because otherwise you're not going to get anybody on board. No one is going to be convinced by your invisible God. Like we need to have something. We need to be able to have these more convenient, easier things for the people to attach themselves to in order to control them. And if you want them to be moral, the only way you're going to get them to be moral is to have them sort of, believe these things, which aren't entirely true, but you do the best you can. You have a heuristic. That specific story is not talked about in my essay, but my essay touches a lot on the essential Jewish idea of anti-idolatry, like no depictions of God, no speaking God's name, no God but God, no idols should be worshipped, in lieu of God or on the way to God. It's just God, and you have to be able to attach yourself to that really scary, mysterious thing which you can't see, and almost devote your life to it as best you can in whatever way you understand that to be. Because if you devote yourself to anything less, if you make any kind of idol, then you are not you're not fulfilling your human potential. You're not being the most authentic version of a living thing that you can be, and you're going to suffer because this thing is not going to provide what you want it to provide for you, and other people are going to be able to destroy it. You will be eating your gold back, right? It's the gold will be fed back to you at some point.
Mm.
It's toxic.
Mm.
So in a way, like, and I've conceived of this, like a version of this for a long time. I feel like the ideal way to proceed in life is to almost have this sort of double consciousness, and I don't mean double consciousness in the Du Bois sense, but with double consciousness as in the most abstract sense. I'm sort of willing to accept my identity as as God's creature, to put it in a maybe not completely adequate way, but that I am just along for the ride in this great reality thing that I happen to be a part of. And I should enjoy that and try to contribute to that, whatever is in my power to do. But then if you lived your whole life like that, you wouldn't really be striving for much of anything because you could just be content with reality as it is. If you were just fully attached to what is, right? To the I am that I am. So in a way, you need to have this sort of fear of death. You can't totally try to get rid of it. Like having it is also part of the bargain of being able to do cool stuff in the world. You might be able to, in some sense, transcend the immortality project by saying, well, I'm attaching to myself to the undying thing that always is. But also, you need to have that fear of death in order to pursue an immortality project that might provide some value to society, might provide some value to the world and to your fellow human beings who you hopefully are attached to in some way. You want to provide a service to humanity, and the motivation to provide a service to humanity is bound up in this idea that what I'm doing matters, and what I'm doing not just in terms of me as a part of God, but me as an individual matters. So yeah, and I talk about this in some of my poems that like it's a weird thing. Like poets need their fear of death. Like in a way, I think we create art to sort of assuage our fear of death, but at the same time, if we got rid of it completely, there would then be no motivation to create art. So you need it at the same time that you're like trying to get rid of it, but the needing it and trying to get rid of it, that that journey is the destination, right? It's just this dynamic but constant state of thrilling anxiety, and that's just how you live your life if you choose to be an artist or to be most of anything. And like unless
Yeah.
you're being unless you are able to become some sort of mystic on a mountain, not doing much of anything.
Well, that's what I'm going for. I know I know I should be able to respond to at least some of what you've just said, but I can't. You've said a mouthful. is
Yeah,
what
no,
I'm trying
I'm
to
sorry.
say.
I was going on one of my autistic rambles.
We need to take a break because I need to put a jumper on and make some tea. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk concrete tactics. So we're going to go from like the loftiest to the most granular, I think. Well, we're going to try anyway. As always, there is more of this conversation in the secret show, which you can get to by going to SLEERICKETS.substack.com. Pop in your email address. You'll get a week's access for free. It's pretty cheap if you want to sign up after that. And I think you should. I think you should do it. So many Substacks charge you too much money for too little. We charge you very little money for hours and hours of, like, you would never have to fold laundry without being distracted again. That's our promise to you. In the second half of this conversation, Elijah and I talk tactics. How do you figure out where to send your stuff? What do you say when you send it out? That sort of stuff. It's, in many ways, it's a conversation that's probably most suited to poets at the beginning of their careers. But like I said, every day someone's born who's never seen the Flintstones. Maybe there's some little tiny tip in there that might help you, even if you are an expert at this already. And I also have a little story about a really good thing that happened to a poet who I really love. And that was very satisfying to be able to talk about. So look, I've been thinking about Alice's Movie Corner. I have to be honest with you, I have not had a head for movies lately. I really haven't been able to focus to watch an actual full-length film. It's bad, I know. It's not good. I made a little deal with myself that for a little while at least, until I feel like I'm not so scattered, I'm just not going to look at the internet anymore, like any of it. Just email. That's it. I'm 4 days in. It's pretty weird. Like, stuff is probably happening, but you know what? It doesn't help if I know. It doesn't help if I know about the stuff. I did rewatch Wild recently. You know, the Reese Witherspoon, written by Nick Hornby. The book is by Cheryl Strayed, Oprah Book Club type of vibe. It's very Obama era. It's such a great film. Like, if you are at the point where you're just like, I think I need the world to stop and to get off, you could do worse than spending 90 minutes watching Wild. I also just think it's such an achievement because the book is so juicy and there's so much detail, but really it all happens inside Cheryl Strayed's head. And so the fact that Nick Hornby then went and like wrote a movie that worked, given that constraint, I think is pretty phenomenal. Also, Laura Dern in this movie. Yeah. Okay, so it turns out I still have strong feelings about movies. I just had to think for a minute about what I watched that was good. Go watch Wild. Don't look at the internet. Sign up for The Secret Show, SLEERICKETS.substack.com. You can reach Matthew, as always, at SLEERICKETS@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening. And with any luck, we will all be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.